It's Reality Check with Craig Price.
I'm an idiot.
4 minutes in and I'm already wrong.
I'm like a monkey. Hello, look at me.
You're like a beautiful mind. I'm more like Forrest Gump.
So it's,
Craig Price is the man.
I knew it. Craig, shut up.
It's Reality Check with Craig Price. This week, Laurie Guest is here to talk secret shopping. Welcome to the podcast. Thank you for listening. Before we get to this week's guest, a little cross promotion. If you don't know, Alan Cerny, who's past guest and resident film critic, Alan Cerny and I do another podcast called Matinee Heroes, where we discuss some of our favorite movies and take life lessons from them to use in our own lives. This month, on May 14th, we'll be doing a live podcast at Comicpalooza. We'll be discussing the movie Predator to celebrate its 30th anniversary, and we've got past guest Ming Chen joining us. We'll have giveaways, surprises, and prizes, so if you're in the Houston area, May 12th through the 14th, go to comicpalooza.com and get tickets. We are going to be Sunday, May 14th, 4:30. And check out the podcast at matineeheroes.com. Now, if you ever scanned the back of a newspaper in the want ads, you've seen a bunch of secret shopper announcements. But on today's show, Laurie Guest is going to talk about the more involved aspects of true secret shoppers. You know, it's more than just buying stuff and taking a survey. It's really digging down deep and learning about what is being done on the front lines. She goes real deep for her clients, and I wanted to share the secrets of secret shopping with Laurie Guest. Secret shopping to me has, and I've been experienced as a customer service rep, I guess you'd say. I've had secret shoppers come to me, and it's about a 50-50 split whether I can recognize them or not, because usually it's someone who would never walk into the store, who is kind of looking suspicious half the time, and they walk up to you and they like have a predetermined thing that in their head that they want to get, and they want to see if you're going to screw it up. So you tell me what a good secret shopper should do and how they should approach secret shopping.
Well, I think a good secret shopper, first of all, you better not be able to identify my shoppers because they're not doing their job if you can pick them out. I want them to behave exactly like your real customer would behave. And of course, that's challenging if you have a particular type of business that is very difficult for an outsider to shop. Then we have to be very, very particular who we send in and what training we give them. But when I was putting this business together, I heard all the time that people can spot shoppers right away. And my whole thing is they're supposed to be coming to you through the eyes of if they were really doing business with you. No matter what it is that you sell, my shopper can imagine what it's like to engage with you, what they like, what they don't like, and not be so worried about phrases you should have used that maybe would move the transaction forward. That isn't the type of thing that we're focused on. So I think that helps. I don't know how often our shoppers have been spotted, but certainly is the goal not to be.
And of course, the ones that I don't notice, I mean, for me, I'm going by anecdotally, it's 50%, because half the time I feel like, oh, yeah, I can definitely spot that person. And then afterwards they'll say, well, last week there was a secret shopper here. And I'm like, oh, I didn't see that one. But they always walk up and they start ordering, because this was when I was young and a teenager working in a food service. And they'd be like, I would like to get, and then they'd have to think about what they wanted, not by looking at the menu, by thinking about what was I supposed to try out. Oh, yeah, I'm trying the new McRib, and I've got to figure out if that tastes any good, kind of situation.
Well, I think what happens there is that you'll see all kinds of ads on, in newspapers or online ads where they're looking for any shoppers because they need mass numbers of shoppers to go and try a Slurpee or try whatever. And anybody can apply to do those jobs. So I can see why those types of shoppers would be spotted. But in our business, I carefully handpick them. In fact, as often as possible, I do the shopping myself. If it's within a reasonable location, or I can do it by phone or by internet shopping, I personally do it. But when we get beyond that range, there's too many to do, then I will hire shoppers. But they are trained to do it the way I want rather than just, respond to an ad and hope you do it right. So I think that could be a differentiator there.
And today's guest is Laurie Guest, so I'll be saying guest quite a bit today. And she is with, obviously, Guest Enterprises, once again, another guest. So how did you start this? I mean, because like I said, I'm mostly familiar with secret shoppers through the ads. You see them all over the place, especially in the back of, trade magazines or the learner annex ads. They're just constantly looking for a bulk amount of secret shoppers. But how did you become more of a customized, I want to say, executive secret shopper?
Right. I wish there was a different phrase for it, because we're not doing the same thing that somebody who replies to an ad is doing. It's a very different technique and procedure. But if I didn't call it secret shopping or mystery shopping, I found that clients didn't know what I was talking about. But, Craig, it has a really interesting start. About 15 years ago, I was hired to come in as a professional speaker and do a customer service training program for 50 local small businesses. Most of these people I knew I would have a personal relationship with of some kind. Either I'd been a customer or they know who I am. It felt a little bit odd to be telling them, here's how you should have better service. There was something that just felt weird going into it. And I also knew or predicted that they would be sitting there with their arms folded with a little bit of attitude, like a lot of people are with customer service. Tell us something we don't know. And I could already visualize it. And it was starting to make me a little nervous. I don't get nervous when I speak, but this was making me nervous. And I think it's the same as when we speak in front of friends. It's not the same as strangers. And I thought, now what could I do that would really, well, to be blunt, justify the work I was doing, that they couldn't push back on me for customer service 101. What could I possibly do? And it dawned on me that if I actually tried to do business with each and every one of those companies in the month or so before the speaking engagement, that I would be able to use that as some intel. That was the original plan. But then when I shopped them, I was shocked at what I found. And I learned very quickly that we have to praise in public and criticize in private. So I couldn't just say, let's say I secret shopped you and for some reason you failed at what you were doing. I can't just put up a slide of your business and then start going, well, I went into Craig's place and I was supposed to buy a pair of boots and look what he did. I mean, that would be terrible. So
can I interrupt you real quick?
What's that?
Can I interrupt you real quick?
Sure.
Did you not do that when you were talking about websites and search engine optimization? Did you not use me as an example without my knowledge about Craig Price, the serial killer, at an NSA event?
I did do that. Yeah. And that's how I learned along the line. We better ask. You know what? That's not true. I did ask for permission. I called you up and asked, didn't I?
No, you did not. You told me after the fact. You said, I just used your name in this great program, and oh, hey. And it's like, okay. I don't care, but because I'm the least upset person you can get. I don't care about that kind of stuff, but I just thought it was funny that you did exactly that.
Yeah, well, that's a good point. That was internally in the National Speakers Association, which is different than these people who paid me to come in and tell them stuff. I guess I see a line there in the sand. But it was really interesting to get in and see people with their arms folded. And in my head, I'm thinking, okay, you're acting like you don't need to know this, but wait until I share with you. And that's where the aha came, is to finish up that piece of it, is that I praised in public, here's the people who did it really well. And then everybody who was in attendance went out with a sealed envelope with a confidential report inside. So if you didn't do so great, you got it in a sealed envelope rather than me telling the world about it. And that's how it started. And I realized that people really wanted to hear what happens when we try and do business with you. So it's quite a hoot of a job.
When they did well, did you still give them an envelope that just said, you did great?
Yes, everybody gets an envelope. In fact, this is what's interesting. The people who do well want to follow up with more business with me. They want me to either come in and tell it to their team, or maybe they want 2 other people shopped in their organization. The people who get a lower report card, they get a C, a D, maybe once in a while an F. I generally don't hear from those. Isn't that fascinating? You would think that if you got a low score, you'd want to learn how to be better. And I don't know if it's embarrassment or defensiveness or don't care. I don't know what the reason is. Maybe they're irritated with me. I'm not sure. But you would think that if you got a bad report card, you would just scratch and scratch to make it better. And it's not the case.
Well, maybe if they weren't aware that it was coming, that maybe it's because I know unrequested advice often goes unheard, or they don't really respond well to unasked advice. So maybe
that's a really good point. Yes, so that could be exactly why.
But if you tell everybody up front, hey, this is going to happen, you will get a report card, make it part of your advertising, maybe they'll accept it a little easier.
The only hard part there is if we advertise that we're going to shop you, boy, if you were going to be on the lookout for a shopper, you really are now. For sure, I think we'd get spotted if I warned you I was coming.
So let's talk about going in. what kind of things do you prepare for as you walk into a shop? Is there a certain, are you there for a certain item? You're just there to browse? How do you want your reps to walk in?
Well, it definitely depends. We do a lot of service industry, so a lot of banks will hire us. So there we have to do our homework. In fact, just a couple of weeks ago, I secret shopped 14 banks in the southern part of Illinois, which is I'm from northern Illinois. So I had to go clear to the other end of the state, which means that I need to orientate myself with the community. If you're going to walk in and ask to see a loan officer and you're supposedly buying a house, I better have some idea of what the community is like. So there's a lot of homework involved in some of the shops and figuring out how to pretend to be the right person. And I found, here's an interesting tip, is the closest I can get to the truth in my lie, the better off it is. So in other words, if I pretend to be a woman who's married with 2 children and I'm an entrepreneur, and I used to live on a farm as a child, if that's my storyline when I meet with the loan officer, it's a lot easier to pull it off because that's close to my reality. As opposed to pretending I'm something totally different than I really am. You can get stuck in your fib a little bit there and get caught.
Oh, absolutely. I tell people all the time that, don't lie or cover up when you make a mistake because you have to remember lies.
Yes.
And if you know if it's just the truth, you don't have to remember the truth. You just tell what happened. And so
right.
It's the same theory. You just tell what have happened, but you just kind of massage it a little bit for a good cause. You're doing it for a specific reason. I guess this is sanctioned lying.
Mm-hmm. Sanctioned lying. Well, I was hired to lie. That's the thing, is that you may not know as the loan officer that you're being shot, but your, bank president hired me to do it. And so in some industries, it's fun because I have to learn a lot about them first. I mean, healthcare, banking, I get those industries. But one time I was hired by a place that repairs hydraulic engines. And so if you are Coke, let's say, and you have this machine that moves the bottles along, but it breaks, you unhook that part of the machine and you ship it to this company and they fix it and ship it back to you. So they hired me to shop their reps. So I had to figure out how to talk like the person who's at Coke, who's calling to ask for a repair on these engines. And so there's a little bit of actress that comes into this and figuring out, give me the words, teach me what it would sound like, because how gruff I am is going to sound very different when I'm calling from a manufacturing environment than if I'm calling you from your doctor's office to remind you of your appointment or whatever. Those have different sounds.
Oh, absolutely. And is there a situation where they would hire you as a secret shopper to test them for specific things? Like you want to find out if they're not necessarily the upselling part, but are they doing something the right way? Are they aware of certain situations? Is that something you guys do, like scenarios?
Yes, absolutely. So I will ask the person who hires me in the first place, tell me what we're looking for. Are we trying to connect with a certain employee? Is there a specific thing? What would they need to do to get an A++ on their report card? What are the steps that they would need to do? And so I go in looking for the steps they've asked me to look for, but in my suggestions, in my recommendations afterwards, even if there's something that I spot that I think they could do better, I will add that even if they didn't ask me to look for it. So I can't think of an example off the top of my head like that, but there'll be times when I'll say, you only asked them to do this and they did it. They did a good job at that, but you could also consider this and then go one up from there. And I think that people appreciate that. Again, what you said in the beginning is key. The people who invited me in, who paid me to do it, they really want to hear the results. The people who are on the receiving end of an unsuspected thing, I'm guessing sometimes they might feel a little duped. So I try to take great care in my reports to use positive words and not beat them up. And, how would each of us feel if we were on the receiving end? I mean, we're joking at the beginning of this interview, you're on the receiving end of a secret shop before, but I had a different motivator than the one we're discussing now. But still, you have that feeling, wow, somebody checked me out and I didn't know they were going to. It's a little bit of an ick.
And you guys actually target individuals in the company if they request that?
Yes. As a matter of fact, with the bank that just hired me, they had a particular loan officer that the entire secret shop was done because of this one gentleman they needed shopped. And so he was the hinge to the whole thing. So sometimes it's very specific, and those are harder shops because especially if I start with a phone shop and there's 6 people who work there, I can't control who answers the phone. It becomes tricky. And you know what? There are some fails when we shop. Sometimes we can't make the connection we want to, and they know that going in. A lot of discussion pre and post, so that there aren't any surprises on either side.
Well, let's take it from your client or prospective client's point of view. When should you think about getting a secret shopper? I mean, I know you should do it at some point, but when do you start thinking about it, and how often should you be doing it?
Great question. I think the 2 places you should really think about doing it. One, if you've had a lot of turnover and you feel that the staff should know what your policies and procedures are and they should be carrying out tasks appropriately, but your gut's just telling you things aren't going as smooth as they should, especially when you're away. I think sometimes when the boss is in the place, things go smoother. So I think that turnover and when you're gone are 2 things. The other is if you've hit stagnation in the growth of your company. So I really zero in on small business owners. And if you feel that your product is good and you're not growing, then something else is missing. Your either service level isn't where it should be, or your ask for referrals and recommendations isn't what it should be. Something's up if you're a stagnating business.
Walk me through what a report looks like, because I know you're trying to give them information about how they responded in situations, but is it dates, times, what you were actually looking for? I mean, what does a report look like?
Yeah, the report will tell you the date and time that we arrived, and it will tell you what our scenario is. What did we come in claiming that we wanted? And then there are 3 pieces to it. One is what I consider the first encounter. How were we greeted? How quickly? How nice was the voice tone? Did I feel welcome? All the things that go into the wow factor of that moment I walk in the door. And then our next chunk is, how does the transaction work? Did we move on to a look and buy phase, if that's what your business is about? If it's sitting down with a representative in some sort, what was the, I call it transitions. A lot of places really are weak in their transitions from, let's say, the front greeter at the teller's desk to the loan officer's office. There are different things we can do there to really improve service. So that's the second chunk, is that transition and the sit down, as I'll call it. And then the last piece is, how well did they do in closing the deal? Did they actually get the sale made, if that's appropriate? One of the favorite things to shop is spas. I have no trouble, Craig, finding secret shoppers when you get a free massage. And I tell every woman who volunteers for a spa, I'll give you the spa deal, but you better answer the phone when the gynecology client comes in, right? I mean, you can't just pick and choose.
Oh, man, in for a penny, in for a pound with you.
Yeah, exactly. And so, some places are easy to shop, like spas and restaurants, and then others are a little bit tougher to shop. But those are the 3 big pieces: the greeting, the transition transaction, and then how do they wrap it up? What's the follow-up and that kind of stuff? I believe, don't quote me on this, but I think we have 36 things we look at and evaluate.
Well, how often, because everyone has a bad day, so how often do you go in to evaluate them? Is it a one-shot deal with you, or is it something you arrange with the client? Or is every time at least a minimum of 3 so you can get a real idea of who these people are?
It depends on what the client contracts for. So sometimes it'll be multiple visits, although most clients invest in a one-hit wonder. So they might have 7 locations, but we only shop them once at each of those locations. And this really does become, the Russian roulette of service. Like, you get what you get. And unless they've asked me to try and find a specific employee, and then that fee is a little bit different because it's a lot harder to do. Now, the pushback that some people will give is, my gosh, like you just said, anybody can have a bad day. And my response always is, yes. And I represented a real customer. So if you had a bad day on that day and it reflected how you treated me and what our guest encounter was like, then that's going to impact your business. So I'm not saying people can't have a bad day, but that's the luck of the draw. Some customers only come in one time. You get that one shot for the first impression cliche that we hear all the time. So we got to figure out how to deal with our bad days so it doesn't impact the encounter.
So how do you become a secret shopper? Because you say that, at a certain amount, you can't do it all the time. Because I know you're a busy speaker, you're a great speaker, so you can't do every single thing that comes through. How can someone, not that you're hiring, but how can someone become a secret shopper?
Great question. So at this point, people reach out to me and they say, I would love to do this. And I get their basic contact information, specifically where they live. So that if all of a sudden I get a client from Ohio who calls and I am not going to be booked to go to Ohio to shop for them, then I'm going to start reaching out. Who do I know in that region? And that's one of the benefits of the job you and I have, is that we know so many people across the country. So honestly, the first place I start is calling somebody I already know in that reasonable region and then say, who do you know who? So it really starts out as simple as, where are the connections? Now, I think as this becomes more mature in the next decade, I am imagining there'll be a time when I have a roster of speakers that I go to every time. But right now, they get handpicked and personally trained when I need them, because I only need to train them to do that job. So again, if I had an eye doctor in your region and I needed a shopper, I might call you and you might say, you know what, I don't want to do this. I have no interest in this, but my wife is all over it. So I was like, great, put her on the phone. And I would set up time to show just her how to shop just that eye doctor. I don't need to teach her how to shop the banker because I'm not hiring her to do that. So it becomes a very one-off training, which is not a good use of time, but it makes sense to me at this stage. We only take about 7 or 8 secret shop contracts a year. We are not doing this full-time. As you said, I'm already on the road a lot. So this is just something that we do as contracted, not a daily basis kind of thing.
So you've done this for 15 years. What's the weirdest client you've had to deal with? Or the strangest? I don't want to say weirdest because that sounds like a negative connotation. What's the most unusual situation you've been hired to do?
I would say the one that I mentioned before, the pieces of equipment in manufacturing that I know nothing about, that was really a hoot of a job because I had to have a very different sound. I had to figure out how to say the words. And it was 24 sales guys that I had to fool. So they're internal guys. They really know the language. And there was one guy that I got busted. He knew that it didn't make any sense. The story didn't fit together. I'm pretending to call from this place that he visits all the time. And it's only apparently a 1-floor factory, but I didn't know that. So I made some comment about the second floor. I don't know how I did that. I don't remember the details, but I was so busted. And when it came time for the reveal where I'm going to meet all these guys in person, the second he walked up to me, he's like, "You're Jackie, aren't you?" Which is my fake name that I use. He's like, "You're Jackie." And it was just hysterical because I was totally busted and we were still able to have a good time with it. The story's much, much longer. I won't bore you with, but it was just interesting to be busted in front of everybody and then be able to use that as some comic relief. And as we started to unfold the results of our testing. So I think that's the most unusual situation I've been in, is trying to pretend to be something that I've had zero experience with. So 23 out of the 24 I fooled. There was only one guy I couldn't get past. So he'd be a guy like you, Craig. You totally would bust me.
I have no idea because I often take people at face value at the wrong times. Because if it wasn't me, I'd probably bust you. Like, I mean, if you weren't analyzing my department, but I was in the company, I might be able to bust you. But if it was something that's like on me, I would probably be pretty bad at it. But and here I was hoping you had like a story of where you were like testing out weed dispensaries in Colorado or adult stores in Texas or something.
Well, even if I did, I'm not sure I would share those. No, actually, it's pretty boring work, really. I mean, I enjoy doing it, but as far as being having a good story about it, I think the best one I have was an eye doctor who asked me to secret shop a new staff member, and he had trained her exactly what he wanted her to say when she answered the phone. He had this spiel that he wanted done, and I said, "Well, how confident are you that she's going to do it?" And he's like, "Oh, really confident." And so I call her up on the when I was supposed to, and she starts doing the new patient appointment, and she's doing a fantastic job. I mean, it is stellar. I'm giving her all 5s. I mean, she's doing fantastic. But we get towards the end of the call and she hasn't done this specific thing he wanted her to say. And I'm feeling bad for her. So I thought, okay, I'll throw her a slow one down the middle, see if she can hit a home run. So I said, well, before I let you go, I'm pretty new to the area and I'm wondering, what else can you tell me about the doctor's background? And so I've teed it up perfectly. All she has to do is insert the spiel. And instead there's a long pause. And I have learned after years of doing this, when there is a long pause, stupid is coming out next. There's this long pause. And she says, well, he's 6 foot blonde and gorgeous. What more do you really need to know? That's always been my favorite story because although when I called him back with the report, he was flattered, it was not what he was looking for. And the point became he was so confident that she would be saying the stuff that he thought patients would think were important about coming to him. And from her viewpoint, he's just a hunk. Why would you care how good a doctor he is? He is so good looking. I just thought that was hysterical. That's one of my favorites.
So they really do have. I like how you say there's a pause before stupid, because normally people think stupid comes out instantly, but usually people really wind up to throw out something really stupid.
They do really wind up. Well, I bet you notice that sometimes when you interview people, right? Sometimes there'll be this couple beats and you're thinking, oh, something good's going to come out of her. And then all of a sudden they say blah, and you'll be like, yeah, that was completely off base. All the years you've been doing this, that has to have happened to you.
It's really just the opposite. They'll be talking and you ask them a question and almost their immediate response is the truth. And then they realize, oh my God, I forgot to turn the filter on. And then they then they have to maneuver and try to talk their way out of the hole they just dug. So
that would be fun.
I would
like to see that happen.
Yeah, I think it's different when it's business oriented. I think they're trying to maintain business and try to think of the job. And so then when you threw them a personal question like that, she kind of went,
Well, true. And I also think people in jobs are very robotic. It's, do you want fries with that? You pull the string, there's a snake in my boot. I mean, it's the same repeated thing over and over. And that's one of the things we see a lot, is that employees have been taught what to say, but somewhere along the line, they lost their personality. They're not engaged in the conversation, and they're using, whatever the recorded soundbite is for this part of the transaction. And that drives me crazy. Let's be engaged and be present in our customer interactions.
Well, Laurie, there's unbelievable amount of information from you all the time, not just on this, but when I see you at NSA, you're talking about topics that aren't related to secret shopping at all. You're a very talented and amazing person that everybody refers you to. So where can people find you if they want you to talk about secret shopping or other things?
They can find me at my website, which is laurieguest.com. And I spell Laurie, Laurie. And then guest is Guest, like a guest in a hotel. So easy to find me. Phone number, email, all that kind of good stuff is there. And as you can tell, I love to talk. So if the phone rings, I pick it up and I talk to who's on the other end.
Well, I thank you for being here, and I am going to put this down as 5 stars.
Hey, thanks. I appreciate that. And you've been shopped.
That's the show. Thanks again to Laurie for coming on. Don't forget to get your tickets for Comicpalooza. I'll be moderating panels, taking part in other programs, and more. They've got a great lineup, and I'm looking forward to seeing you there. Follow the podcast on Twitter at RealityCheckPod. Send any questions, comments, or guest suggestions to Craig at speakercraigprice.com, and we'll see you next week.